Hi, folks, and welcome to the Meaningful Money Podcast. This is Season 15, Episode 5. This is the podcast dedicated to helping you put your finances in order. My name is Pete Matthew, and I'm going to share with you everything you need to know and everything you need to do to secure your financial future. I'm here to help you make sense of money. Here we are once again. Great to have you with me. Now, last week we considered our goals and our actions from a 40,000 foot perspective, high up in the air, long distance view, all that sort of stuff. We talked about the things that you can do from that vantage point. Today we need to drop down to the runway level and get a little bit more granular, shall we say. So that's where we're going today. As usual, after the main body of the show, I'll read out a review that's been left, talk about what we're going to be discussing next time. But before any of that, remember, this podcast continues to be brought to you with the help of my friends at 7 Investment Management. They've been helping me out here since the spring of 2011, which shows incredible support and fortitude on their part. So I'm really, really grateful to them for continuing to help me out. Please do check out what they're up to. They're at 7im.co.uk. That's the number 7im.co.uk. Go check them out. And don't forget the Meaningful Money branded self-investment platform, when you can get all the information you need to know on that at meaningfulmoney.tv/podcastinvest. Okay, right. So we talked about last week from the 40,000 foot perspective, pretty much the only thing you can think about is the investment strategy. Sure, you can see ahead and maybe head off some things that might be coming down the road, but we tend to spend most of our time on the runway level. But I encouraged you last week to think about like a POTS-based approach to meeting your savings goals. Just simplifies things. But we now need to look at on-the-ground actions that we need to take to make progress towards our goals. Good news that the whole thing is a lot simpler than you might think. I love to simplify things, as you know. So remember, notes and links, all that good stuff, they're at the show notes. It's the only link you need to remember, meaningfulmoney.tv/pp5. That's for Planning with Purpose. That's the name of this season, episode 5. So meaningfulmoney.tv/pp5. All the good stuff you need is there. Let's look at what you need to know first. Okay. Number 1, simple is best. Yes, it is. Right. I am continually battling complexity in my life, and people ask me questions in the Facebook group, all that sort of stuff. Simple is always best, right? Whenever new clients come to me, it's always interesting to see the position that they've got themselves in. Of course, every situation is different, but almost without exception, folks that I work with have got themselves into a greater or lesser degree of complexity, and unnecessary complexity at that. So let's be absolutely clear. Simple is always best. Complexity isn't some kind of badge of honor in your finances. I've got very wealthy clients with a mere handful of accounts because that simplicity serves their needs. Your financial affairs should be as simple as they need to be, but no simpler. So don't oversimplify. If simplicity means that you pay more tax than is necessary, for example, then obviously you're going to need to do something differently. If simplicity means that you can't get at the money you need right away, at the right time, then you're going to need to complexify a little bit. But for most of us, we need a few simple pots to get where we're going to go. Right? That's all we need to do. We're going to look at things like leverage and next level diversification over the sort of coming weeks. But please remember this mantra: simple is best. I promise you it will serve you very well as you go through your financial life. Number 2, one big goal and lots of smaller goals. We mentioned last week that most of us have this one big goal and then lots of smaller ones along the way. So our big target is usually FI, retirement, whatever you want to call it. I prefer FI, financial independence, reaching the point at which work is optional. The date we like it by will be individual to us, of course, and will probably be a moving target. We talked a little bit a couple of weeks ago about identifying that big number, so we have a figure to work to. After that, we're going to have, most likely anyway, some smaller goals along the way, events, things, experiences, stuff that costs money. Those will fall along our timeline, either nearer in time or further away. We're going to need to provide for those goals, both large and small, and a little bit of detail on how to do that in just a minute. But Remember for now that the smaller goals are just as important as the big one. They should be just as exciting, right? Life is for living very much in the now, not just the one day in the future. So let's work towards some goals that can add some spice to life while we're still grafting towards the big one. Agreed? All right. The third thing we need to be aware of is a triple threat, okay? Tax, costs, and lack of focus. All right, perhaps you weren't expecting the third one. As we move from goals to actions, another thing to keep in mind is this triple threat. It doesn't have to be a threat to our success, but it can certainly be a threat to the speed of our success and the timeline. Because if we're paying more costs than we need to, etc., then it's going to take us longer to reach our goals. If we want to stick to something like our intended timeline, we need to watch out for tax, for costs, and a lack of focus. Paying unnecessary tax is lunacy, all right? Anyone sane knows that tax is a necessary component of a healthy, developed economy, all right? It pays for the roads we drive on, the hospitals and the schools that we use, the emergency services, all that stuff that we couldn't do without. But the government provides tax breaks for a reason, right? And they do so knowing they will get way more tax back from other sources than the tax they give away in the tax breaks. So if HMRC, for example, give you tax relief to pay into a pension, they know that that money will be invested into shares or funds. Those invested companies will employ people. They'll pay national insurance and corporation tax, of course. The employees that they are hiring, they'll pay income tax and national insurance. They'll pay VAT on the stuff that they buy with the money they've already been taxed on. So we need to use every single tax advantage we've been given and do so unapologetically, okay? Because we need to understand that tax goes around and comes around, if you like, right? The government and the revenue will always get back more than they give away in tax breaks. Costs are insidious. We know this, okay? We got to demand value at every point in the process of putting our money to work. It's why I don't like actively managed investment funds. I think you're paying for questionable value, generally speaking, okay? There's always exceptions to the rule. Some advisors don't offer any value at all. Some offer pretty much priceless value. So costs are a big deal. And finally, and this is a biggie, lack of focus can really set your target, for instance, your FI target or any one of your other goals, drifting backwards towards a horizon instead of coming closer to and into sharper focus, right? So we need to be, say it with me, intentional about everything we do with our money. Stay laser focused and intentional, because a lack of focus can really hurt our plans, and at the very best, you could say, at the very least, would set them back in time, because time has an incredible way of just going. It passes very quickly. Recently been, well, we'll talk about this a little bit in a minute, but we've been building the Meaningful Academy, and when I was testing out the Voyant Go things, I just was putting in a kind of almost a caricature version of my own circumstances with my ages, my kids' ages and stuff. And I think, man alive, I have 15 tax years to go until I'm 60. That's not a long time, right? So 60 is an arbitrary date, of course, but suddenly I think 60, I would want to be stopping working by then. And so it's really important to keep this stuff front of mind, which we're going to go into this week and next. Okay, so costs, tax, these things are insidious. We've got to make the best of them. Lack of focus, though, is arguably the most insidious threat to our financial goals of them all. So, enough theory. Let's get practical and look at what we need to do. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is to set our saving allocation, right? Remember we talked about pots last week. This is such an easy way to keep your life simple on the way to achieving your goals. Now, by pots, I don't just mean what kind of account you have, so pension, ISA, all that stuff. I mean, is there a way of keeping your different pots of money separate? The money you're aiming towards your goals, is there a way of keeping it separate? So I think the easiest way of thinking about all this is with an example. Okay, so let's say we have a 38-year-old couple, two ladies, Jane and Laura. They have no kids and they have no plans for any kids. Together they earn 60 grand a year net, 5,000 quid a month net, and they would love to hit FI by age 50. They're 38, so that's just 12 years away. Right now, they live on 3,250 quid a month, and that includes their mortgage payment, on which they have, coincidentally, 12 years left. So they will be mortgage-free by their intended FI date if they just keep on with the normal payments, okay? They'd like to have a really big holiday when they both hit age 40 in 2 years' time. That's going to cost them 20 grand. It's going to be a really big holiday. They'd like to change both their cars in the next 3 years, and they're really keen not to go into debt for this. And they expect to buy for 10 grand each, right? They don't sort of hanker after really expensive cars. They've got a nephew that they'd like to give a smallish sum to, maybe 5,000 quid in 5 years' time, because that's when he'll go to university. Doesn't really matter at this point what their FI number is, how much they will need to have to be able to make work optional. Just try and keep this scenario in your head, right? As we talk about how they might apportion the disposable income that they have, which comes to 1,750 quid a month. So just to recap, 12 years to their desired FI date, they will have paid their mortgage off by then. They'd like a big holiday in 2 years, 20,000 quid. Change both their cars at some point in the next 3 years or so, 10,000 quid each, so another 20 grand they want there. Maybe give their nephew 5 grand in 5 years' time. So remember, we talked about the timeline and how these events, these goals and required expenditures at different points sit on that timeline. Now, these people can, just remind myself of their names, Jane and Laura. Jane and Laura can, if they want to, ignore their mortgage payment because they're going to pay it off by their FI date anyway. So they don't need to apportion any more of their disposable income to that goal. They can if they want to, but they don't have to. And they've got 45 grand worth of short-term goals to find the money for, right? The holiday, the cars, and the gift to the nephew. The holiday and the cars come to about 40 grand, give or take, and 2 years worth of saving 1,750 quid a month amounts to 42 grand, right? So given that they're paying into their work pensions anyway, and they're paying down their mortgage, they could put enough money away in the next 2 years to pretty much nail their short-term goals, right? And because of this, I would be allocating all of their savings towards those short-term goals for 2 years, right? Because they know they can do it in 2 years with their disposable income. Now, any pay rises they get over the next 2 years, I would redirect that extra money, if you like, towards their FI pot, because they know that the short-term goals will be realized, unless they want or need to buy the new cars more quickly. So once that's done, they can allocate less than 10% of their disposable income towards their now 3-year goal of giving money to their nephew. 3 years at 160 quid a month will add up to £5,800. They said they wanted to give him 5 grand in today's money. In 5 years' time, that's 5,800, give or take. Okay? So they can do that, 160 quid a month. It's less than a tenth of their disposable income. Once they've nailed the holiday and the cars, they can just allocate 10% of their net income towards this gift to their nephew. Job done, all right? Or they can save all their disposable income for just 3 more months and have that thing nailed, okay? Then they can throw absolutely everything at their FI plans. They can maximize tax relief with salary sacrifice, perhaps. Take out a lifetime ISA before they reach age 40. Make sure they're getting the bonus. In fact, let's just make this a point of its own, actually. Second thing we need to do is to choose our weapons, okay? Weapons. Perhaps that's not the best word, but you get the point. Choose the tools that we're going to use to build our wealth. So you know that pensions are the best vehicle for building wealth, right? Nowhere else do you get such great tax benefits, particularly if you're a high-rate taxpayer. But Jane and Laura have got a problem because they want to hit FI at age 50, not 55 or 57, right? So they're going to need to have a pot of money from which they can draw before they reach the age that they can draw from a pension. So they should probably take out a lifetime ISA for the bonus, but actually that's not available till they're 60, right? So they've got a window between age 50 and 55, 57, where they're going to need to fund their lifestyle before they can access their pensions and a little bit later their lifetime ISA. So that's going to influence their choice of accounts, right? Logically, an ordinary stocks and shares ISA would be the choice for that. Excuse me. So here's the logic. They should work out how much they need to have in ISAs by age 50 to fund 5 years worth of their lifestyle, right? I would probably aim to have that fully funded 2 to 3 years in advance of their FI date to provide a buffer of time, right? So once the short-term goals are fully funded that we've talked about, I would keep the pensions being funded as they are for now. I would max their lifetime ISAs and then throw everything else into stocks and shares ISAs until it's funded. Any pay rises, I would divert into pensions, right, to get to max the tax relief there. So can you see the thinking here? We need to identify pots of money that we need to draw from at different points on our timeline once we don't have earned income coming in. And we need to understand the accessibility rules of each, right? When pensions can be taken out, when lifetime ISAs can be taken out. So let's say their holiday goal, rather than just 2 years out at age 40, was 7 years out at age 45. Well, they could and they should consider investing towards that goal rather than keep the money in cash, right? Because it's a longer period of time. They could use a general investment account to keep the money separated out from their FI pots that they might have in pensions and ISAs. The amounts involved are not likely to cause them any income tax or capital gains tax issues anyway, probably just for a holiday. So maybe it makes it easier to keep the money separate by not having it in their ISA. So we need to understand the rules and accessibility of each kind of account, figure out which ones apply best to the given goal that we're working towards. It can be easy to say that, as a stocks and shares ISA is accessible tax-free at any point, let's just put everything into that. But that is an example of being arguably too simplistic. Jane and Laura will have no other earned income from the point at which they stop working. Once they hit age 55, probably 57 for them actually, given the ages. Should have worked that out before hitting record. They can draw from the pensions to use up their personal allowance. Currently £12,500 they can be earning tax-free because it would fit within their personal allowance. So they're actually drawing a tax-free income from a potentially taxable pot, their pension. Once their state pensions kick in, they're going to have to rethink that most probably. So if you throw in a rental property inherited from parents and it all changes again. Financial planning is fluid, remember, because life is changeable. So choosing the accounts in which we're investing is important. We need to understand tax, we need to understand accessibility rules, and then try to work out the best one for each goal that we're working towards or each stage of our life. Tax wrappers have investments inside them. And the third thing we need to do is to keep investing dead simple. Right? I know this is not news to you. Keep investing dead simple. And tax wrappers have investments inside them. Just to remind you, investing is a function of risk and timescale primarily. So for Jane and Laura, as their FI date is 12 years hence, and as they're likely to be investing for 40 to 50 more years after that, they really need to ramp things up in terms of risk. So assuming they can cope with the volatility of a 100% equity portfolio, probably that's what they should aim for. It's 12 years out, right? If not, they need to go as high risk as they can bear. The short-term goals, they're all less than 5 years out, so that money probably shouldn't be invested at all. It should be kept safe in as high interest a bank account as the girls can find. As they're saving monthly, they should utilize monthly savings account, right, to max the interest payable. If they had a sort of medium-term goal like a holiday which was 7 years out, then they would certainly invest more conservatively than they would to meet their FI goal. And because it was leading to a cash event when they needed the money to buy the holiday, they would reduce the risk, reduce the equity exposure as they got closer to the goal. The last 2 to 3 years or so of saving towards that holiday in 7 years' time rather than 2, the last 2 or 3 years would actually just go into cash. They wouldn't be invested at all. So I've dealt with investing tons of times in the past. I've done the Learn How to Invest course. That's now being folded into Meaningful Academy. A little bit more on that in a minute. We're going to look at more advanced investing techniques using things like EISs and VCTs and leverage a little bit later on in this season. But generally, those are all to be utilized once the basics are ticked off, right? Because they always involve greater costs and greater risk, right? Don't overcomplicate investing. It is not a badge of honor, right? Do it if you want to, but generally speaking, investing is a fairly simple process, certainly should be. So don't overcomplicate it. It's not big and it's not clever. Okay, fourth thing you need to do is to weight your savings rates towards shorter term goals. So tilt them towards shorter term goals first. So as we've seen in the example, as Jane and Laura have got some short-term goals over the next 2 to 5 years and then an FI goal which is 12 years out, they ought to, in my view, weight their savings to get the short-term goals ticked off first. That should be obvious, I think, but it bears saying anyway. Determine just how important those shorter-term goals are to you and weight your savings accordingly. I think there is a clear psychological benefit in hitting your short-term goals. It's good for the soul, folks, right? It's good to live a little bit in the day that you're living in, not just in your future FI life, if you like. So this clear benefit of hitting your goals will give you confidence that you can also hit the longer-term ones, right? Okay, including the big FI goal. So really go for those short-term goals with gusto. Don't just keep adding more short-term goals, though, so that your FI keeps getting put off. Identify the short-term goals, throw as much as you can at those, while obviously making sure you're getting your max match from your employer and your pensions and things like that. Okay, we're going to talk about exercising control a little bit later in the season, but you're going to need to commit to focusing on your goals. You need to maintain your focus. Don't let the drift make you miss out. One of my sort of online heroes, a guy called Michael Hyatt, talks about the drift, and he uses an example of when he went snorkeling for the first time. They had a few snorkeling lessons, himself and his wife, and they thought that they would go out into the bay of the resort that they were staying at and just do a bit of snorkeling on their own. What they didn't realize was that they got caught in a current, and when they finally came up, they realized they were a mile from the shore. Now, they made it back, both pretty strong swimmers, but that was certainly pretty scary, and he calls it the drift. Because they were focusing on the amazing things under the sea, they didn't pull their heads up to remind themselves of where they needed to be. And that focus is so important. We can get our heads down in the nitty-gritty sometimes and lose our long-term vision, lose our long-term focus. So do whatever it takes to maintain your focus, but two great ways are to keep your goals front and center with some kind of a tracker or some kind of review sheet or something like that, and then to keep to a regular review schedule. So a commitment in your calendar to review things regularly. I'm going to cover both of those things, a one-page financial plan and a review schedule. I'm going to cover both of those in the next 2 weeks. Okay? So, in summary then, you see what I mean? It's all fairly simple, isn't it? Okay, I really hope that you weren't expecting this season to be unnecessarily complex. While we're going, I think, a little bit deeper than before, more advanced wealth building actually doesn't have to mean more complexity, all right? We'll continue to build on this information throughout the season, lots more to come as we've talked about leverage, more advanced investing, more advanced behavioral finance stuff, but generally, more advanced doesn't have to mean more complex. It just means that you will need a greater understanding of some of these things, right? So that's where we're going over the coming weeks. So I hope you're enjoying it so far. We're 5 weeks in. So far, the feedback on this season has been great, so thank you for that. Okay, this is from CDW5689, who says, an excellent resource. I have listened to all of Pete's podcasts. Wow. And I urge you to do the same. If you're a beginner, you'll gain a great insight in how to build wealth over time. It's very practical. If you're more experienced, you'll get the necessary nudges to keep you on the right path, and there are always nuggets that you hadn't considered or known. Keep up the good work, Pete. Thank you, CDW5689, you catchily named person you. Thank you for leaving a review, really appreciate it. meaningfulmoney.tv/iTunes is where you need to go if you're of an Apple persuasion, but to be honest, wherever you're listening to this show, if you can leave a review, then please do. If you're watching on YouTube, then hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and hit the little bell icon as well, which will let you know whenever a new episode gets uploaded. Although that's not that difficult because it's every Wednesday and most Fridays for 5 Minute Friday. Okay, just a quick nudge. The Meaningful Academy Founders Launch is still open for only a few more days. Okay, places are being taken up really quickly. I've been delighted at the feedback so far. So by the time actually this goes out, we may have closed it because we're looking for 100 founders and we're sort of closing in on that goal. So check out meaningfulacademy.com and if it's still open, it'll say it's still open. But right now, recording this a little bit in advance, I don't know. Okay, so next time we're going to be talking about taking the timeline ideas, the goals and actions that we've been discussing in the past few weeks and putting them into a simple one-page financial plan that you can keep in front of you and you can refer to as needed. Okay? So remember, you got a question or anything like that, you know what to do. You can just leave them at the show notes for this episode, meaningfulmoney.tv/pp5. Oh, something's just occurred to me. Just a quick shout out to everybody that joined me for the meetup in Birmingham last week. We had a great time, met 30 or so Meaningful Money community members, and it was great to just chew the fat with you and share a couple of drinks and get to know some of you. So thank you everybody that turned out. Keep your eye on your email. If you're on the mailing list, I'll let you know when the next one is going to be. But if you want to make a note, and if you happen to be in London on November the 8th, then keep that note in your diary. Details to follow. Make sure you're on the mailing list for more details about that. Or make sure you're in the Facebook group, which is meaningfulmoney.tv/community. Okay? Brilliant. That's it, folks, for this week's episode. Hope you've enjoyed it. Again, notes, questions, comments, all that sort of stuff, meaningfulmoney.tv/pp5. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you're enjoying this season so far. It's really good, actually. I'm enjoying it. It's been quite challenging for me to write in many ways, but definitely enjoying it, and I'm really grateful for all the feedback. Don't forget meaningfulacademy.com for more information about that. Looking for just 100 founders. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Whatever your medium, thank you. See you soon.